Good evening, Bulavinaka and Namaste. I'm Vijay Narayan, and tonight on Fiji Village Straight Talk, we have the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad, talking directly to you in relation to the 2023-2024 national budget that he delivered on Friday, sharp at 10 a.m. and addressing you on what matters to you in the next financial year, how things will change, how does it affect your pockets, how government will be utilizing your tax dollar to provide government services, and what is the state of the economy. Professor Prasad, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight.
Good evening, Vijay, and good evening to our listeners.
Professor Prasad, while announcing the budget last Friday, you stated that the People's Coalition government is a 6-month-old government with a mandate to deliver change. But what you have walked into is a deeply grim state of affairs. If you can please explain.
Well, Vijay, the reason why we are saying that is that because it's absolutely important and vital that people understand, because we appreciate the expectations of the people when we came into government. Despite the fact that we were highlighting some of these issues when we were in opposition, people understood the problems, whether it was to do with water, whether it was to do with health, whether it was to do with roads, whether it was to do with education, technical education, agriculture. So people had a fairly good knowledge of what the problems were. And so it is important for us as a new government to put out very, very clearly right at the outset. We've been doing that, and I wanted to do that in the budget as well, so that people understand where we are and what we have been landed with. So we have to talk about the debt. There is no escaping. And as I said, in this budget, out of a budget of $4.3 billion, we are going to spend more than $1 billion, more than 500 million on principal payment, more than 500 million on interest payment. So one out of every dollar in this budget, every $4, one out of every $4, 25% of the budget will be going to debt servicing. Then we have to invest quite heavily on the maintenance of infrastructure. One of the things that we've been landed with is that the maintenance of infrastructure, whether it's roads, whether it's water, hospitals, health centers, government buildings, we have allocated right across the ministry a significant amount of funding to do maintenance. So that's what we've been landed with. And what we have also been landed with is a process which was very centralized, dictatorial. Civil servants were put into a culture where they were afraid to make decisions, where the implementation was slow. So it was very important for me as Minister of Finance and a ministry that would be responsible for monitoring and evaluating, our implementation. Putting out an allocation is one thing, but making sure that it is delivered and we get the value for money. A lot of the things which we have found out in the last 6 months doesn't require lots of money to fix. I mean, you look at CWM Hospital, look at the laundry. Fire occurred, many years ago. We are sending laundry from Suba to a private, contractor in Nandi. So these are things that need to be changed, and it will take time, patience, and understanding to do that. So that is why I don't want to go to the past personally. But if we do not tell the people what we have landed with, what we have inherited, and what we are then going to do to resolve this, people will not have that understanding. And I think we have done that. I think people appreciate, from the overwhelming response that we've got so far, it is very clear that our people out there understand the problems and they know what we're trying to do in this budget, and I appreciate that, and I thank the people for their support so far.
I'll just go straight into roads. For example, it has received massive budgets, more than $3 billion in the past few years in total. And what we've heard is that when the FRA acting CEO was called into the Fiscal Review Committee meeting, and this is public knowledge, the person came in with a sheet of A4 paper with things written on it. When he was questioned about strategic plans in relation to roads. We know in business, strategic plans and execution of the plans, value for the dollar is so important. Just give an analysis for roads.
You were absolutely on the dot, Vijay, on that. I mean, you would never imagine in a private organization what was being done in terms of use of taxpayer funds, particularly FRA. This is an organization where we have spent more than $3 billion in the last several years. They don't even have a strategic plan. They don't have a priority list. There is no planning, monitoring, evaluation, and the quality of roads. I took my permanent secretary, Shiri Gaundar, and the staff to Banualevu, and I said, when we got to the junction of Sabu, which is where the new road was built right up to Duketi Health Center, and it was built under the Prime Ministership of Mr. Rambuka, 92 or 93. And I said, look at this road. This was built then. All the heavy trucks have used this road, logging, carting, not a single pothole, over so many years. That's the quality of the road. When they saw the state of the infrastructure, they were shocked because there was no planning, there was no monitoring, no evaluation. FRA, Vijay, had spent all the money, all the 1 year's budget in 6 months. When we came into government in December, when I called the FRA, when they were asking for more money, I said, where is the budget? They had spent all the money in 6 months. So we provided additional funding because we wanted to fix the road, potholes. People were complaining, and I understand the frustration of the people, and we sympathize with them. But this is what was happening, and it is actually quite sad, and if I could say, criminal for a government to allow that kind of planning and execution where taxpayers' funds are involved, where we are required to provide the services to our people. And so what we are doing, Vijay, is making sure that we strengthen the National Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Office. We want to have a system where we, in the Ministry of Finance, we follow these things very carefully with different ministries, different organizations. We will ask for accountability. We'll ask for updates to ensure that things are done properly. And so the new FRA board, I think we have a very competent board now. They are looking at all the modalities of contracts, of how things can be done. So you are absolutely right, and this is where we are heading to, in terms of addressing that issue.
My question also, a lot of people would have seen this. A road got fixed, and a few weeks later even, it opens up again. What happens to those kind of cases? There's been so many in the recent past.
And this is why I want to say to our people, we will need a lot of patience. We will need a lot of understanding. We have created PWD. I've allocated $5 million to set it up, and that is precisely to fix the rural roads. Priority is very important, Vijay. In economics, we call the opportunity cost. For any government, any organization, it's never enough. For any family, it's never enough. So what the principle is that, you look at that budget and you prioritize. You say, if I don't do A, I can't do B. Or if I do A, what will be the impact of not doing B? So what was the need? Whether we needed to build the Queen Elizabeth Drive, Nasese Drive, whether that was a priority. And none of that happened within the FRA and in other areas as well. I mean, we built a hospital in Ndronga, Navosa. We spent millions of dollars when we should have fixed Singotoka Hospital, upgraded it. We could have put an ambulance in Navosa. Any emergency cases would have got to the hospital. So we have neither. We have a building there, we spent millions, not being used. And yet, on the other hand, Singotoka Hospital. So the opportunity cost of building Navosa is a dilapidated, lack of facilities, poor service at Singotoka Hospital, where majority of the people go.
Deputy Prime Minister, people may say you're talking about the previous government. From your perspective, why do you think it is necessary to do this?
As I said, Vijay, I don't, personally, I don't like to go back. But we are in government just 6 months. We need to tell the people what we have. If people, and I think a lot of people have understood this in the last 6 months. Media is free. People like yourselves are asking, good questions. You are exposing, what we are saying. You're talking to a wide cross-section of people. There is no fear. There are a lot more people who are trying to bring the problems to it. And we have said very, very clearly, since we come into government. And because we believe as a government that it's a good thing for the government to be told something is not happening. Why is this happening? Because then we can do that. And I think for us, it is important to tell the people what we inherited and how we, so we're not only saying what we've inherited. I said very clearly in my budget. Second part, I said, let me tell you what we are going to do to address this. And we have done that very clearly in this budget.
And we'll talk about that. And also we have your questions, several questions where we are putting together, and we'll try to get through the questions. It's all about accountability and transparency and asking the questions that matter. And in relation to the government debt, $10 billion, $6.218 billion is domestic debt, $3.664 billion external debt. How is this being managed, and what will be the total national debt after the 2023-2024 financial year?
Yeah. So Vijay, that's a very good question. So what we have done as a government, we understand the issue of debt. We know that it's there. It has to be dealt with. So the first thing I did was to put out a fiscal strategy, medium to long-term fiscal strategy, which I presented to Parliament. And in this budget, we have carefully crafted our revenue measures. We have carefully crafted our expenditure measures. And we have done that to bring the deficit down from an average of about 9% over the last 5 years. So it is now down to 4.8%. And we have set a path, a progressive path over the next several years to bring it down, by 2030 or by 2035, depending on how we're going to assess what's going to happen, in terms of the headwinds internationally, what are some of the obstacles that we might face, in terms of achieving economic growth. But the good news is this, that we've had a very strong recovery in the tourism industry, very strong performance on the remittances side, which helps consumption, which of course helps, government revenue as well. But the other positive thing is that we have created an environment where there is a sense of optimism, confidence. We are improving the ease of doing business. The banks are telling us that the pipeline on loan approvals and investment is increasing. And so we expect, we revised the growth rate already from 6% to 8%, which is a conservative. So my view right now is that if we do not have any really serious, natural disaster or, other things that might happen internationally, we are headed for a very good growth. So we have packaged the budget to cut wastages, put revenue measures, and provide quality spending for social welfare, for infrastructure, for water, for health and education. And if you see the allocation, Vijay, within the deficit, we have not compromised the quality expenditure in critical areas. And the reason we have been able to do that is we have kind of put the lid. As soon as I came in, I put the lid on wastages. One of the reasons why I did not do a revised budget or a mini budget was to see what we had inherited. Otherwise, we could have just camouflaged, covered it, provided additional funding to FRE. We would not have known, what was going on. So it was a great thing that we didn't actually bring a revised budget or a mini budget, because we now were able to see very clearly. We put the lid on wastages, and this budget has come out very well, because we were able to see and sort of seep through it very clearly what was happening. And so we have a good plan and what we have done with this budget, Vijay, is to send a very, very good signal to the private sector. One big thing that the private sector is always worried, because they know that eventually when government begins to engage in wastage, secrecy, mismanagement, corruption, the ultimate impact is on the private sector and on the people. Internationally, we have provided a great signal to all our donors, to all our multilateral partners, that we have a government now that has put a very prudent, well thought out plan to reduce the deficit, to progressively reduce the debt, and build expenditure platforms which will support economic growth through infrastructure, through looking after our people and improving education and health, which ultimately improves the human capacity and productivity of our people.
Just on the safeguarding of FNPF funds, a question was sent by one of the listeners that can there be a process that employees reps are elected by the members who are part of FNPF? What's your thought on that?
Very good question, and as Minister of Finance, under whose portfolio the FNPF comes, you will notice, Vijay, that immediately when we got into government, as we promised, we put an employee rep nominee from the Fiji Trade Union Congress, Mr. Attar Singh, a very experienced trade unionist, as well as an employer's representative. And going forward, we are very mindful of the objective of the FNPF, the investments that the FNPF has made. And the good news is that, FNPF, through the investment that it has made, it's able to pay good interest rate. This year, 7% has been paid, one of the highest, after so many years. So we want to make sure that FNPF remains an agile, efficient organization which never shakes away from the responsibility to its members. And that is why we have put the workers' rep. Going forward, we are going to look at the FNPF legislation. We have restored the contribution from 1st of January back to 18%, because let's put it this way, the employees of this country, all of you, people like yourselves, you contributed, you helped your employers, you took a cut on the employer contribution to your account, as well as you took a cut from your contribution to look after yourselves during COVID. And I think that was a great contribution from the workers of this country during COVID to help employers, and the biggest beneficiary was the government, because there's a huge bill there as well. So we are going to restore that from 1st of January 2024.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, you have made some changes to taxes and duties, and a lot of discussion took place in relation to this. There were some very strong critics. There were some people who strongly supported that it needs to be done, that you have to take the medicine now for the future generations. You have maintained the zero rate VAT for 21 items and included prescribed medicine to be zero rated as well. However, for the rest of the goods and services, people will pay 15% VAT. What is your message to the people who are saying that you are hurting them by increasing VAT?
So there are two things, Vijay. First, we used to have a 15% single rate of 15% VAT rate from 2011 to 2015. So 15% is not a new thing. Then the previous government brought three rates. They had 0, 9 and 15. So on many items people were paying 15%, on some they were paying 9%, and for 21 items they were paying 0. What we have done is to rationalize that, because the two things was happening with it. There was a lot of distortion with three rates. And not only employers were complaining about it, retailers were complaining about it, but there was a lot of distortion, and we feel that there was quite a bit of leakage as well. So in this budget, we've kept 0, and I've added prescription medicine for two reasons. One, people are still making a transition from COVID, from loss of income, from loss of jobs, and we felt that we don't want to, push people, who are on the margins of poverty by lifting this safeguard that was there that will keep the prices of some of the basic food items to a manageable level. So that's the reason why we have done that. The other thing that we haven't talked about, Vijay, and I want to mention it here, is that there was a lot of push, from those who are analyzing our revenue, those who are looking at, what was happening, to raise reduce the income tax threshold, from 30,000 to something below that. We haven't done that because we realized that those people in the middle income group, those between 16 to 30,000, a large number of people fall into that group. And that is the disposable income that is very important. So we are saying that if the VAT is being increased on other items from 9% to 15%, we are not touching this threshold because we don't want to disturb that income and bring it down. So a lot of those category of people are feeling the relief that we went against some of the advice to lower the threshold and kept the threshold at that level. And that also helps those who are earning above 30,000. So people like yourselves, people who are earning 60, 70,000, 100,000, before the threshold went up to 30,000, for example, if somebody was earning 100,000, before the threshold went up to 30,000, if it was at 16, they were paying a tax on $84,000. But when the tax threshold went to 30, they were paying tax on only 70,000. So everybody benefited. So even those category of people who are earning 50,000, 60,000, we have not taken away the income that we could have easily taken, if we were looking at a very progressive tax system, because we understand that if we are increasing VAT from 9 to 15%, we don't want to affect them and reduce the disposable income. So it's actually a very carefully crafted, understood, and what we've done, Vijay, over the process. This is also very important. The process we followed, all the discussion we had, we went 1%, 2%, 3%. We tried to understand how this will affect the revenue. We had real data. We went through it, and we made sure that by having this way of crafting the budget, we will try and reduce and minimize the unintended consequences of any tax policy. On top of that, we have increased the company tax from 20 to 25%, and many of the organizations are happy in lieu of the fact that we would be able to improve the ease of doing business and remove all these regulatory obstacles that many of them face, so they can lower the transaction cost. We're doing that. We have removed some of the concessions. I know some people were not very happy, but we are saying that for many years some of these companies have enjoyed that concession, and it's time for some of them to pay. And what we've done is increased concession from 0 to 3%. It's still a very large concession, but it gives us a little bit more money. So those are the measures that we put in place.
Professor Prasad, what is your view on having two VAT rates? As it has resulted in the past, some retailers beating the system, making money for themselves. And how will this be monitored?
That's true, Vijay. Ideally, a single rate would be, from an economist point of view, would be the most efficient. It will kind of cut out any of the distortions and leakages. So what we intend to do is to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation. We have talked to FRCS. We know that a lot of things happen in their organization. People were just sent home. Experienced people, were asked to take redundancy. Since we came in, we've asked the organization to take some of those people back through normal processes, and they've done that. And we want to make sure, and we are also going to have meetings with some of these large wholesalers and retailers post-budget, just to understand and implore on them and put compliance measures so that the tax measures that we take, for example, duty reduction on some of the items, to help support our people. We want to make sure that those prices are passed on to the consumers. Freight costs are coming down, and we expect wholesalers, we expect them, and I know that, and we are going to follow that. If the freight cost is coming down, then their cost needs to go down. That should be reflected in the supermarket when the product actually lands on the shelf. So part of the strategy that we are adopting in this budget is to strengthen. In fact, we had done away with the planning office. There was no planning. There was no monitoring, no evaluation by Minister of Finance. You give the budget, you leave it there. You didn't know what was going to happen, whether we are going to get value for money. So I have put some money within the planning office and what we call, economic intelligence. Because unless you have that kind of intelligence, at the Ministry of Finance, and monitor and evaluate, you can't evaluate the impact of the policy. There are always unintended consequences. Sometimes the unintended consequences can be good. More often than not, it can be bad. And if you don't follow it, and I can understand when you say that people are complaining that the prices are not going down, because nobody is monitoring and evaluating whether that impact of a particular policy is going down to the...
We'll talk about that in detail. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break.
Why are we playing outside? Because my dad is thinking my home is going to be super cool. No way! Yeah, he makes me a new desk. Well, then we can stay together. He's also going to paint my walls. Where did he get this tooth from? Kasabi is there for everything you need. I wish my dad could do that. Because your dad is not Kasabi's dad. Dad, go to Kasabi!
2023.
Vanaka, we are the Dauntless Movement crew here from Australia, and we are so excited to perform for you guys for the Fiji Showcase in 2023.
Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got jet drinks like extra strong, and already we living till we see in the sun. Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got jet drinks like extra strong, and already we living till we see in the sun. We bring it like this, we bring it like that. We bring it to the party like we all that. Yeah, we got a party here, that's right. We bring it like this, we bring it like that. We bring it to the party like we all that. Yeah, sound is hot, that's right. Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got jet drinks like extra strong.
It's going to be awesome. So come on down with your family and friends. We'll be at the Vodafone Arena in Suva from the 30th of June to the 8th of July. See you there.
Welcome back. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. Our guest tonight, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad. And we are also asking your questions that you have sent across, and continue to send them, because this is also about asking your questions. It's about accountability, about transparency, about your tax dollar, what you want to know and where it is being spent. This question is from Professor Prasad. They have asked about, I think they must have missed the announcement of this part, about increasing social pensions for retirees. You have actioned that in the budget. Please explain to the people watching and what they expect.
So Vijay, one thing we've done in this budget is to increase the social welfare funding by a big amount. In fact, the social protection programs have received a total funding of 160 million. 78.2 million is allocated for the social pension scheme, which will support approximately 26,200 people above the age of 65. Payments for those between age of 65 to 69 will increase from $100 to $115, and about 28,000 people above the age of 70, we have increased the pension by $25. So those above 70 are currently getting $100, will now get $125 from 1st of August. We have also increased the support for the poor and disadvantaged. $45.6 million is allocated to what we call the Family Assistance Scheme. So a one-person household allowance will increase from $35 to $40.25. Two persons household allowance will increase from $58 to $66.70. Three-person household allowance will increase from $92 to $105. And four-person household will increase from $127 to $146. Then we have also increased the allowance for persons with disability by 15%, and the current allowance of $90 per month for persons living with permanent disabilities will increase to $104 per month. Then we have also increased the child protection allowance, and for that, children not in school increased from $29 to $33. Children in primary school from $35 to $40.25. Children in secondary school from $46 to $50. Children with disabilities increased from $69 to $79. And children in residential homes increased from $120 to $138. Bus fare allowance for elderly, we have allocated $10 million. Then we have also increased the pension rate for all government pensioners by 15%. One additional thing that we've done in this budget, Vijay, is, you remember in 2011 under the military government, they unilaterally changed the contractual, obligation from FNPF to provide the allowance. So a lot of people, especially those who had low balances, went on to a lower pension rate. And it was like a very painful thing for a lot of them. So what we've done, FNPF can't do anything right now because they are restricted by law. So as a government, we wanted to make sure that we help them a little bit. So all those people who were on the low pension rate after the contract was abolished and the law was put that they can't even challenge it, we have increased their pension. We are including them into the social pension, 1,500 of them. They will get, if they are between 65 to 69, they get $115. If they are over 70, they get $125. So we've included them as well.
Another issue is about, you talked about kids who are not in school, loitering, drugs, all these issues are very critical issues for our nation. And we can see the Fiji police force changing its posture in recent weeks based on the public outcry. Like areas in Suva City now, we now see police are more visible and taking people in relation to drugs, and they're now saying they will also look at addressing the issue, the real issue of loiterers who seem to be attacking innocent people at night. I see you've allocated specific funding for that.
That's one of the things, Vijay, that I had discussed with the police, the acting commissioner of police and the Minister of Home Affairs when we were discussing the budget. And all of us are on the same page, and we have allocated enough funding, not only additional funding for constables and police, but also specific funding. And I'm kind of reminded in the 80s, when we used to be students in Suva, police presence was everywhere. And so this idea of police beat patrol, we are bringing it back, and I'm sure the commissioner is on top of it. And these drug issues, loitering, Vijay, was a big issue. Remember the Honorable P.O. Tikundundua, when he was in opposition, moved a motion to have an inquiry into the drug problems, and obviously, you know what happened. He was pushed out of Parliament after being assaulted by the then Prime Minister. So now we are in government, we actually understand the problem, and we are working very, and police, good news is the police, acting police commissioner and the whole police department is actually onto it. And you can see, as you quite rightly pointed out, that they mean business now, and they're going out and making sure that we get those people who are spreading this kind of activities in urban areas. So police presence, especially in the urban areas, but also in the rural areas, will be increased. And this budget caters for that.
Some of these questions I'll ask you now. Several people have sent these questions through. So I'll ask on behalf of them. Concerns have been raised about organizations like the FCCC, that they have to be stringent to ensure the reductions are passed down to the people. These are the tax and duty reductions that government announces. They said for years they have not seen the benefits flow down. What will be done for such organizations to be more effective?
Vijay, one thing that we want to do as part of this government, and we've done that already in 6 months, we are not going to be run by a cabal or an interest group, and our policies are not going to be for particular groups or particular people or particular interest. And as you know, I have already informed Parliament in my budget speech. Also, we have tabled a consequential legislation to remove that exemption on capital gains tax on shares. It was meant for a specific group of people, or should I say, one company. And as a result of that bad policy, we would, by the end of this month, we would have lost close to about $70 million in government revenue.
I'll talk about that. Okay. I think it's important for that capital gains tax. You just address that first since you've touched that.
Sure.
Now, word is that, and it's been confirmed. What the facts are
Yeah.
that the law was changed
Yeah.
to benefit those who did not pay their capital gains tax, that they would be exempt. That was the law change. And for those who paid their taxes on time,
Yeah.
there was nothing for them. So you made an analysis that this is specifically
Yeah.
to benefit those
Yeah.
who did not pay the capital gains tax. Why would a tax policy like that be introduced?
In fact, Vijay, if you recall, it was brought during COVID, slipped into as a consequential bill when it was not. And as I said in Parliament, that was probably one of the most devious, corrupt pieces of legislation ever to have come to Parliament. And we opposed that when we were in opposition. It was backdated, and you're right. How can you do that to somebody who owes tax, has not paid, and you bring a law and backdate it and say, now you don't have to pay. But you don't do anything to all those people who paid it. And since that law, not only that particular person of interest or company of interest or whatever would have benefited, others now, since then, have used that law and have been exempted from paying capital gains tax on sale of shares. And as I said, if you look at what we might end up losing by the end of this month, will be close to $70 million.
Going back to FCCC now, and how you'll make sure that they'll be more effective.
That's a very good question, and as we speak, I've already asked the CEO to have a meeting with me. We want to make sure, and we know, as I said, we have the economic intelligence. We know that the freight cost is coming down. We know that some of the impact of some of those things that are happening, regionally, globally, particularly freight costs, because freight was one of the big things that pushed the prices of items up, during COVID and after COVID. Now it's going down, and you can see that it's already being passed in the reduction of fuel price, and we want to make sure, and I'm going to also have a meeting, a very friendly meeting with all our wholesalers, between the 7 or 8 of the big food importers, we import about more than 90% of them. So we want to have a good discussion and understanding of how, when freight costs go down, when other changes happen, that is reflected in the price of goods at the supermarket. And FCCC will have to play a very, very important role, and we are going to make sure that that happens. And we mean business in this. We want all our businesses to make enough profit. Every business has to look at the bottom line. We appreciate that, but we also want to make sure that when their costs go down, especially when we are importing food, that is reflected in the prices in the supermarket, because it is our collective responsibility to ensure that our people, who have suffered very high prices, can see some relief. And the budget measures, we've reduced duty on some of the, imported, meat stuff, because we feel that, that's where a lot of the low-income people, get their protein. I know some people may not be too happy because, it protects the local production, but we have not done it in a way that will have any impact. I think in areas where there was shortage, so local prices were going up. I mean, Rewa Dairy was a very good example. We gave 32% protection for a company for 10 years. And look at what happened to the dairy industry, and the prices of milk products at that time, during that period, was never down as it should have been, and we never increased our local production. And that was another.
So consumers never benefited.
Consumers never benefited. The farmers never benefited. One big company benefited because we had given a monopoly, in terms of reduction.
And the dairy industry is now in tatters. You have more imports
exactly.
now. So what will be done in that area?
As I said in my budget speech, Vijay, we have allocated sufficient funding for the dairy cooperative. I've had meetings with the farmers before the budget. We are going to put up a very good strategic plan. We may need support from technical people to ensure that we restore the dairy industry. But it was disastrous, and that was another scandal that I would say that is sad for this country.
I'll go back to freight charges because we have questions that were also sent regarding that. People are saying freight charges are dropping. Some people who are dealing with this saying it is now just about 20 to 25% up from the pre-COVID level compared to massive increases during and after the pandemic reached thousands of percentage points. The excuse is still being used, people are saying. What will the government do about this?
We as I said, Vijay, I think that's a very good question, and people raising that, are right. And as I said earlier, if the freight cost is going down, because the tax is on freight inclusive, and if the freight cost is going down, then the tax on that is also going down, and so the cost should also go down. So that's the link, and there is no argument that it can't be done. So we will be pursuing that very aggressively.
One of the issues also is that CEOs who are paid by tax dollars of this country are getting exorbitant salaries. The people are asking this because the Prime Minister's salary has been scrutinized. Your salary and other ministers' salaries has been scrutinized. Your allowances have been scrutinized. You have dropped it. What about these CEOs? There's some CEOs who are getting more than the Prime Minister of the country. There's some CEOs getting between $340,000 to $500,000 a year.
You are absolutely right, Vijay. The point about CEOs' salaries, some of them, probably don't deserve that, and the breadth and scope of the work and the responsibilities that they have, some are different. So first of all, just on the salaries of the ministers and the Prime Minister. So what we have now is we have continued with the 20% reduction in the salary. People have forgotten that this salary and allowances was set up by the Fiji first government when they won in 2014, when they were still an interim government. Before the first sitting of Parliament, they brought this decree and they set the salaries for the ministers, allowances and members of Parliament before they came to Parliament. Now, the allowances were exorbitant, unnecessary. On top of UN per diem, there was a 250% top-up for the Prime Minister. There was 200% top-up for ministers.
On top of the UN per diem.
On top of the UN per diem. And not only that, on top of that UN and top-up, there was an incidental allowance, daily incidental allowance. So we have taken that incidental allowance completely. We have reduced the top-ups by a huge amount. And what we will be doing in the next session of Parliament is to appoint an independent emoluments committee. And that committee's job would be to go back and look at all the perks and benefits of members of Parliament, Prime Minister, ministers, to ensure that it's commensurate with what is necessary and what is appropriate. Then the government had already announced that we will set up the Higher Salaries Commission. Vijay, you would remember that it was abolished by the previous government. So all these state, statutory bodies, independent commissions, their salaries of the CEOs and allowances of people who sit on those commissions and boards were determined by the Higher Salaries Commission. So very soon that would be brought back. In fact, the government would be making an announcement perhaps soon on the appointment of the Higher Salaries Commission. and we will rationalize all this.
Because people are asking that if these exorbitant salaries continue
Yeah.
and they've been asked to tighten their belt and pay
Exactly.
more taxes, what will government do? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
they are paying their taxes. They are wanting that it's
Precisely.
a smooth and efficient running of.
No,
affairs.
they are absolutely right. People are absolutely right to be concerned and outraged by these exorbitant allowances and salaries, and we as a government we recognize that, and so we have made that decision already, as I announced in my budget speech. And Vijay, I know how much ministers actually get when they travel. It was for 8 years, the previous government ministers collected those allowances. And I know how much I can,
Give one trip.
so if you're going to say a place like Korea, for 5 or 6 or 7 days, you are likely to collect, between 10 to 13 or 14,000 in just allowances. Depending on which route you've taken, how many stops you have made, and how much time. So these are all part of it. So it's quite exorbitant. And see the UN rate, and obviously it includes for ministers business class airfares and all that. So the cost can be quite significant.
The previous Prime Minister is getting $3,000 a day.
Yeah. And if you staying for 2 weeks, sometimes the meetings are long depending on the routes you take. This is something that we can avoid. I mean, okay, the Prime Minister needs to travel, first class. He needs a good hotel. You need the resources. The Prime Minister, meets people. Ministers do that, but all that should be within reasonable levels and within a reasonable decent limit. And we felt that it was not decent. It was not within the limits, and that's why the government has taken the decision to reduce the allowances.
You talked about abuse of funds, and some maybe through official means.
Yeah.
What is being done in relation to investigations? You said something about Walesi in your budget address. There's questions in relation to contracts by organizations like VATIS, VATIS company that was connected to individuals who were part of the former Fiji First campaign team, and the Prime Minister, when he'd come in, they were removed from any contracts, and also investigations been done, and also about FRA contracts in relation to contracts being given, as you said, in areas where maybe the road was not necessarily needed to be fixed. What is being done in relation to all these investigations?
Yeah. Vijay, some of those like Walesi and others, DPM Kamkamida is working on it. There are different, my view is this, that if people have broken the law, and if that is brought, then they must be held accountable. There are things that, when you talk about pilferage, wastage, mismanagement, corruption, sometimes, these are legally done. And it's very hard to go back and find out all this in a very short period of time. But obviously, the government is determined to root out, those kind of wastage, corruption and mismanagement. It's important that we do that, and I'm sure some of those investigations will throw out. You mentioned VATIS, Qorvis. I'm told by the ministry that like they used to hire these people to write their speeches and do their PR and all that. I don't have a PR officer with me. I talk to the media. I'm free. I write. Sometimes I write my own speeches. I get the technical input from my permanent secretary, very competent man. He writes very well. And there are many other people within the ministry. There are people outside, of government who are always ready to help. You don't need to pay millions of dollars to a PR company from the US or some local, political novices, who happen to be part of the previous government's political parties, campaigners, to get contracts and run this PR thing. So we cut out all that, and we think that those are complete wastage of taxpayer funds.
I noticed that public service broadcast, you're planning to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk when changes started occurring at FBC, which has 2 public service broadcast radio stations, and of course get some money for public service broadcast for television. A total of $10.4 million is allocated.
Yeah.
What is changing this time, because it's not stating that it's going to FBC?
That's correct, Vijay. It's not exclusively for FBC. It's going to be for all media organizations that government ought to use for public service broadcast. So, if we are using Communications Fiji Limited, that's a contract that we're going to have with you. If we are using Fiji One, so it'll be deregulated, and we want to make sure that we are. And government's job, Vijay, is to be fair to every player. You do a lot of, Communications Fiji Limited, has a wide reach. You do a lot of work, that is public service broadcast. During COVID, for example, there are a lot of messages and notices. So we recognize that, and while FBC is funded by government's job is not to monopolize and get one particular entity to use government funds, taxpayers' funds, and compete with other, private players, who are also contributing to the overall objective of public service broadcast. So yes, we have changed that.
You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break.
Why are we playing outside? Because my dad is thinking my home is going to be super cool. No way! Yeah, he makes me a new desk. Well, then we can stay together. He's also going to paint my walls. Where did he get this tooth from? Kasabi is there for everything you need. I wish my dad could do that. Because your dad is not Kasabi's dad. Dad, go to Kasabi!
We are Dauntless Movement Crew here from Australia, and we are so excited to perform for you guys for the Fiji Showcase in 2023.
Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got drinks like extra strong, and already be living till we're seeing the sun. Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got drinks like extra strong, and already be living till we're seeing the sun. We bring it like this, we bring it like that. We bring it to the party like we all that. Yeah, we got a party here, that's right. We bring it like this, we bring it like that. We bring it to the party like we all that. Yeah, Santa's hot, that's right. Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got drinks like extra strong.
It's gonna be awesome. So come on down with your family and friends. We'll be at the Vodafone Arena in Suva from the 30th of June to the 8th of July. See you there!
Welcome back. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. Our guest tonight is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad. And we are talking about the 2023-2024 National Budget, simplified based on questions that have come through, giving you an analysis on how this will affect you and also your questions that have come through.
Yeah.
One of the big issues, Professor Prasad, is the number of people that are leaving our country. Yeah. What is being done to expand technical skills education? Yeah. As we have a major skill shortage where chefs, carpenters, tile layers, bakers, butchers, etc. are being brought in from abroad because we don't have enough people.
Vijay, you've raised a very, very important issue, and we recognize, in fact, for the last 6 months we've been talking to employers. In fact, we're losing people, in government as well, and other organizations. But the more critical area is, as you said, technical skills. So that was a major disaster under the previous government. They set up these technical colleges. More than $20 million went down the drain. They set it up, was run by the Ministry of Education. It failed. Then they transferred that to FNU. Then FNU said they didn't have money. So basically, all the technical colleges, the equipment and everything went to ruin. So what we are doing now is we have immediately, apart from the TELS that we will talk about, we have immediately gone on competency-based training, and we are allocating grants, 500 for construction industry in tile laying, painting, block laying, joinery and cabinet making. These are skills that you can actually train in a short period of time. 1,000 for tourism and hospitality industry in housekeeping, restaurant service and front office operations. These are what we call competency-based training. You can do it very quickly. 300 for automotive industry in basics of panel beating, automotive painting. We want to bring back the government apprenticeship, so 400 awards to revamp and incentivize apprenticeship training. Now, this used to work very well. We used to have people leaving, for the last, 30 years, plumbers, mechanics, but we were always able to train enough people to replace and have the experience. So we are going to bring that back. The other, of course, is the whole TELS strategy. It was a political game. They opened the doors. They put students, there was no proper planning until they realized that it was not working. So in the last 2 years, they tried to do a little bit, in terms of making things work, but it was too late. The horse had bolted. So basically what happened was, in our assessment, almost $100 million out of the 650 million TELS that we are forgiving, that 100 million was spent, Vijay, on students who never completed, roughly. So you give them allowance, you give them tuition fee, they go to the university, they go to the technical institutions, the quality went down, the mark cutoff, universities were competing for more students. So almost to the tune of $100 million that was spent on students who never completed what they were. So obviously, they can't pay, their parents can't pay, and a very small percentage, around 3 to 4% of the total number of students, of somewhere around 50 to 55,000 students, were actually only paying back. And mostly these were those who got very good jobs, who came from good families. So what this government has done is not only lifted the burden by forgiving that loan, on more than 50,000 families and their guardians and their children, but also this was an opportunity for us to craft something very carefully. So we've allocated $148 million, roughly a little bit more than what used to be spent every year on giving loans anyway. So we're not spending too much money than what we were spending, but it was being spent and wasted in many ways where students were not directed into particular areas. So what we've done, we are saying everybody will get a scholarship. And we have a number of skills.
So every child who finishes high school,
Yeah.
coming out, they will be eligible for scholarship.
Scholarships,
Government
as
scholarship.
long as they get a place in the university and meet the criteria that we have put out, as well as the university. So the scheme will be called Fijian Scholarship Scheme. Contrary to all the malicious propaganda and rumors, even now, when we came into government, but before the election, that there will be a race-based scholarship, that there will be no merit, people will lose. Nothing like that. This will be purely a merit-based scholarship. Scholarship for higher education, level local scheme with minimum cut-off mark scheme. We are also ring-fencing some cut-off mark will be 250, while 245 will be for rural and maritime students. Cut-off mark for commerce, for example, will be 280, for engineering 300. So, because you can't go and do engineering with 250 marks. So all that criteria will be there. Then we have what we call the skills qualification based offer letter scheme. Then we have tuition only hardship. Then we have what we call merit based scholarship. Then we have masters and PhD merit based overseas scheme, merit based higher education local scheme, merit based skills qualification scheme. Skills qualification in FNU will have 200 awards, for example. So what we've done, Vijay, we spent a lot of time thinking this through, and based on some of the studies that were done about the labor force needs, the labor demand, shortage. And so what we've done is crafted a scheme, a scholarship scheme that addresses all those issues, with discussions from the employers. Now, the only thing that will happen with this is the loans that have been forgiven will be replaced, the loan agreement will be replaced with a bond agreement. So if you completed a course which had a duration of 3 years and you only received tuition, your bond will be 1.5 times the 3 years. If you get both allowance and tuition, then times 2. So if you do a course duration of 3 years and you get both tuition and allowance as part of your scholarship, times 2, you have to save 6 years. So that's a very good scheme. I think there is a lot of jubilation out there. Students are jubilant. They actually see this. They are prepared to save their bond and be in the country, and they can work anywhere. What was also happening, Vijay, was some of the things that the previous government did, they were giving discounts. They're saying, if you pay 50%, you get forgiven 50%. Now, all that was only being done by a very small percentage of rich students. The parents could afford. So if you had $30,000 debt, after 3 years, and you came from a good family, you quickly said, all right, I'll pay 15,000 and 15,000 is forgiven. But a large majority of the people, the students, their parents, their guardians, couldn't find good jobs, were not able to pay back. So we've lifted that banner. And I think it's a huge, huge step by this government to revolutionize the whole scholarship, skills development and bonding arrangement for our students. And despite some of the malicious propaganda, and this has been a very well thought out, re-evaluated scheme, and it's going to go a long way, Vijay, in addressing some of those skill shortages.
Now, some of the things, the civil service pay structure, you're saying there will be a review because they haven't had pay increments for quite some time. And the nurses are also asking whether they will be getting increments, because we also know there's a major brain drain in the health sector with several nurses leaving our shores.
Yeah. Very good point, Vijay. We've allocated some funding for nurses' pay upgrade. We've included additional funding for overtime because a lot of them were not being paid appropriate, overtime, we are told. So we've allocated additional funding. We have also allocated additional funding for nursing interns, additional funding for nursing. These are new positions, nursing aid and nursing assistants. Because a lot of the nurses right now, because of the shortage, they work for 8 to 12 hours, it's actually quite quite sad that many of them have to work. Plus, they do more than what they should be doing and concentrating on the clinical responsibilities. So these nursing aid and nursing assistants would do things like setting up the bed, doing other things, so that the nurses can have a bit more time, to focus on the patients, to do the clinical work. So we are making the working conditions much more congenial and better, but also addressing the pay grades as well as the overtime, which has been included in the budget.
We continue to ask a few of those final questions that have come through. One is on water infrastructure. We know we've had 47% of our pipes, 47% water leakage from our national piping network, which means almost half of the water that's treated is lost in the ground before it reaches the taps. It's caused a lot of pain for thousands of people not having continuing running water 24/7. What's the plan for water?
Vijay, you are right, and I must say to all our people who are watching me that we understand. People wake up in the morning to find there is no water. We are fully aware of the difficulties that people had. The situation has improved somewhat. We made sure that as a government, we worked with Water Authority very closely during that period where, we had drought, the disruptions were at its peak, to ensure that we provided water to the people. But I know a lot of people were calling me, and I actually sympathized with them and did whatever we could to. So we recognized that it was a big problem, a big disaster that we were left to deal with. So we've increased the budget. There's a major increase of about $60 million compared to the current budget. And of that, $250.8 million, about $118 million, is for operating expenditure to improve the services, but 132 million is for capital expenditure. The Viria Water project, which was a project that was started by the previous government, and I thought it was a good investment, but we are putting additional money into it so that it can be completed, hopefully by July, and then commissioned over a period of time, because if it is done in a hasty manner, Vijay, this is what the engineers are telling us, the Water Authority is telling us, the pipes, as you said, is old. And so it has to be managed carefully, and we believe that once that is done, a lot of the current intermittent disruptions can be minimized. But going forward, we would need more than $500 million investment into making sure that we are able to replace those old pipes. And we are already working with our partners, particularly the Asian Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, the Green Climate Fund, to look at how we can source funding to be able to improve those old pipes. And the loss of water, 47%, 47% to 50%, is a huge loss. And if that continues, we can't supply water to our people, in a continuous manner. So that has to be addressed.
Looking at some of the sectors, tourism definitely doing very well, bouncing back strongly, becoming the mainstay of the economy for now. We see even industry stakeholders saying we need more rooms, another 4,000 rooms needed, or weekends. In the past few weeks, they're saying even the Airbnbs in Nandi and surrounding areas are all out, apart from the hotel rooms themselves. So tourism is one. The other one is agriculture. A lot of talk about diversification, utilization of land, utilization of E-Toke land and returns. How are you looking at that?
Vijay, diversification is very important. You are absolutely right. Tourism industry is very strong. It is important. The signals we are getting from the industry, and we're analyzing the situation in Australia, New Zealand and beyond within the Asian market. My own view is that the tourism industry is going to remain very, very strong. As you said quite rightly, the capacity, in terms of rooms is can be a drag, but we are also seeing a lot of interest, a lot of confidence. The old Pullman is coming on board very soon. There are investments that are going to start in Reki as well, and we see some major investment pipeline in the pipeline that will change those shortages of hotel rooms. But tourism, in my view, is going to remain very strong. But at the same time, we know what can happen to tourism. If there is a natural disaster or another disaster like the COVID-19 pandemic. So for an economy like this, we have to diversify. And agriculture, unfortunately, over the last so many years, whether you talk about dairy, whether you talk about sugar, which was a complete disaster, we lost millions of dollars after 2006 coup from the European Union funding to restructure the industry. All other crop sectors, overall the contribution of the agriculture sector has gone down. Some justify that by saying, other sectors have grown. But the agriculture sector can also grow. And so in this budget, you will see that we have provided a significant increase in the funding. And we have a very good, experienced agriculture minister. And I think we've had discussion, I think he's got a vision. He's hitting the ground already. We expect some improvements in the delivery of some of the services. We have included measures like subsidies for fertilizer and weedicide for ginger, dalo, cassava and rice farmers, which was never there before, because we want to incentivize increased production to ensure that people do stay in those areas, because unless you increase the income, sugar industry farmers always had subsidy for fertilizer and weedicide. Non-sugar crop farmers didn't. So in this budget, we are kind of correcting that, because we want to signal that we are not neglecting those other crop sectors. And I'm confident with the leadership that we have of the Agriculture Minister now, we would be able to increase production significantly.
Professor Prasad, some people have sent us questions and have asked what is being done to unlock the potential of more people bringing goods, mainly food products, into the country, as they say that we are currently having a handful of wholesalers importing these products and controlling prices.
Yeah, you're right, Vijay. When you have, as I said, between about 7 big importers, you can easily say that more than 95% of what comes into the country, particularly food, is controlled, is within them. So as I said before, I want to have a meeting with those big players, wholesalers, to see whether there are ways of making sure that when costs go down, when freight cost, for example, goes down, that some of those reduction in costs can be passed on to the reduction in the prices in the supermarkets for the consumers, and to have some discussion as to how, if there are regulatory obstacles for others, smaller players to import, then we got to remove that. So all that package, of things is being looked at. My own view is that government policy in the long term, medium to long term, should not be dictated by a cabal, which was the case before, unfortunately, and has led to a lot of policy interventions designed to look after certain sections of the private sector or in certain groups or individuals or companies. We don't want to do that. We want to support all of them. We want to provide incentives specifically where it's necessary, and that's why as Minister of Finance, I want to run a open dialogue strategy so that we support the growth of the economy in a way that is sustainable, that looks after our people, and that's inclusive. Inclusive growth and development is fundamental, for the progress of any country. And that's what I intend to do.
My final question is again by several people, and it is in relation to that they are saying they're paying their taxes on time, they ensure they do everything right, and they're saying that they have seen and heard that there's been allegations of wastage and abuse of tax dollars. They're asking whether people will be held accountable for their actions and front up and be held to account in court even.
Yeah. They are right to demand that, any taxpayer. And that's the fundamental philosophy, Vijay, that this government has. I have that personally, is that for us, politicians, we come into politics to save our people. If you want to go and make money, if you want to do other things, politics is not a place where you ought to be. And so I am determined in my term as Minister of Finance to ensure, and we're talking about millions of dollars. We're not talking about 100,000 or 200,000 expenditure here or expenditure there. My focus is to ensure that we cut down on this wastage, and all those people who have been responsible for that kind of wastage must be held to account. They must be answerable. And if they've broken the law, then the law should deal with them. That is very clear, as far as I'm concerned.
Professor Prasad, thank you very much for speaking to our people directly on Fiji Village Straight Talk, and I'm sure that he will be back in the following months, and we'll be talking about the implementation of the programs and the budget that will start from August 1st this year. Until next week, have a great evening.
Why are we playing outside? Because my dad is thinking my home is going to be super cool. No way! Yeah, he makes me a new desk. Whoa, then we can stay together. He's also going to paint my walls. Where did he get this tooth from? Kasabian, they have everything you need. I wish my dad could do that. Because your dad is not Kasabian's dad. Dad, go to Kasabian!
We are Dauntless Movement crew here from Australia, and we are so excited to perform for you guys for the Fiji Showcase in 2023.
Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got drinks like extra strong, and already be living till we see in the sun. Move over, cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got drinks like extra strong, and already be living till we see in the sun. We bring it like this, we bring it like that. We bring it to the party like we all that. Yeah, we got a party here, that's right. We bring it like this, we bring it like that. We bring it to the party like we all that. Yeah. cause here we come. We got a party that's kicking like all night long. We got 10 drinks like extra strong.
It's gonna be awesome. So come on down with your family and friends. We'll be at the Vodafone Arena in Suva from the 30th of June to the 8th of July. See you there!